Hello, everybody. Well, today is the defense rested in the Casey Anthony murder trial, and closing arguments will begin shortly. So, by this time next week, we should have a verdict. So, what do you think? Do you think that she'll be found guilty and get the death penalty? Do you think she'll be found guilty of a lesser charge and get life in prison, guilty and get X amount of years, or do you think she'll walk? It is possible that she could walk. Not very likely, though. The more the case went on, I think the less likely that would be. Although the prosecution did not prove murder. And if you can't prove murder, you can't prove Casey committed murder. So I don't know how that's going to go. Some things that they were going over today. They had, what is her name? George's alleged mistress, Crystal Holloway, a.k.a. River Cruz. That sounds like a stage name. Just saying. But she was on the stand. She claims to have had an affair with George, and she claims that he told her that it was an accident that got out of hand. Said he told her it was an accident that got out of hand. So, the one thing, I think she was lying about that too, because one thing when they went through the records and made her read her first deposition that she had given, she had stated that, but it's similar, but not like that. She had said something about, he said he thought it was an accident, thought it might have been an accident that got out of control. So therefore he didn't say that it was and that he knew. He said he felt like it was. So, and then she claimed that yes, she had an affair with him. He said no, they had no affair. Be it whether they had an affair or not, that's really neither here nor there. But she sold her story to the National Enquirer rather than the press, and she sold it for $4,000. I think she was just in this all along for the money. That's what I think. And she was so nervous on the stand that I was just waiting for her at any time just to start screaming and grabbing at her head and saying, "I lied, I'm lying." You know, that's the way I felt about her. But some things that Jose buys, I swear to my goodness, that man, I don't know what he's. If I was just to watch him, I would never think he was an attorney. I mean, Matlock could do better. You know, of course I liked Matlock, but Jose just stumbles over his words and keeps asking the same thing over and over. Like today, he brought up the duct tape again to George and said, "Did anybody else bring duct tape, to put up posters and whatever of the search of Kaylee?" And George said yes. And Jose said, "What brand of duct tape did they bring?" Who's going to know what kind of duct tape and what brand of duct tape somebody brings to your house? Nobody. I would certainly never know. I have a roll of duct tape, I believe, in my laundry room, and for the life of you, I couldn't tell you what brand it was. And I've had it for years. I don't know what brand it is. I have a roll of tape, like per se Scotch tape, but I'm not sure if it's Scotch tape. I don't know what brand it is. Who's going to look at a brand? If somebody was to come into my house right now and say, "Here's a box of staples for your staple gun," I'm not going to look to see what brand it is. That just never comes to mind. So why are you going to know the brand of anything? Anyway, and then another thing, Jose was, the other day, tried to trip George up, and it was funny the way it turned out, because Jose was bringing up George's attempted suicide. And when he brought it up, he said, he was asking George, he said, he asked him some question about the way he put it. He said, "About your alleged attempted suicide." And George said, "Wait a minute, there was nothing alleged about it. It happened." So that made Jose look real stupid, or stupider. And then I'm reading from my notes here. And then, Jose sort of shot himself in the foot with another thing he brought up. If you remember in the opening statements, Jose said that Kaylee drowned in the swimming pool. She was never missing. She drowned in the swimming pool, and that George was holding dead Kaylee in his arms, and that George is the one who covered up the death of Kaylee. Well, then Jose gets up there and tries to paint George as being such a bad grandfather and losing his temper quickly that he brought up this one thing about George buying a gun and was going to go out and look for the person, whoever was responsible for whatever happened to Kaylee. There goes this theory then about the drowning in the pool. Why would George go buy a gun and look for whoever was responsible for what happened to Kaylee if George had drowned Kaylee in the pool? As I said, Jose shot himself in the foot with that one. Jose tried to, well, in other words, today he brought up all of the Anthony's dead animals, even from 30 years ago. And he named them off. And then he asked George, what about Misty? And George said, I never had a dog named Misty. And then Jose went on to something else. He was trying to trip George up on that. He was trying to say that because of the way that the Anthonys buried their dead animals in the past, which was put them in a garbage bag, secure the garbage bag with duct tape, and bury them in the backyard. He was trying to paint that picture of that because that's the way that George always buried his animals. That's the way he buried Kaylee. So after he tried to get that point across, the prosecution came up and asked George, said, Mr. Anthony, have you ever took one of your dead animals and threw them in a swamp? And George said no. And the prosecution said, no further questions. So there goes Jose's theory about that. And then they was talking about how many times that they had called somebody to the stand, and it really got monotonous with all the not the family members, but the scientific people, so to speak, about the hair bands and about the smell and what it could and couldn't have been. And that got monotonous, and that would have just put me right to sleep. But from what I understand, there was a woman in the jury that told them before she came into jury duty that she had plans to go out of the country for the 4th of July weekend. And they told her it would be wrapped up long before then. This is the 4th of July weekend, and they're just now in closing arguments. That could take a few days. I think right now the prosecution is having its rebuttal. Then it's going to be closing arguments. And then it could take several days for the jury to reach its verdict. So I say that she will be found guilty. I don't know what she could be found guilty of, though, if they can't prove murder. I just don't know what she could be found guilty of, if not murder. But I say she'll be found guilty and she'll get a life sentence. I don't think she'll get the death penalty. I don't see that because, like I said, they can't prove murder. But everything that Jose said he was going to, everything he said in his opening statements, he never proved. He never proved anything that he said in his opening statements, which in fact makes him look like as big a liar as Casey. And if you recall, I said in my last video that one of the women that was in jail when during the time that Casey Anthony was there, right after Casey Anthony went to jail, and they corresponded through letters and such because they became just friends, even though they weren't in the same cell. They corresponded through notes and through letters. This woman was in jail because her child had drowned in a swimming pool, and it was her father's fault. She blamed her father for it, but she was in there for murder because her child drowned in the pool. Well, then the next thing you know, Casey tells Jose that Kaylee drowned in the pool, and it was her father's fault. Everything that this girl had told her about what had happened to her. There's another lie of Kaylee's, and Jose hasn't figured that out by now. That's just bizarre. Anyway, so that's what's going on in the case. Now, I hope the jury does take several days to decide the verdict. I hope they don't come in with a verdict until next Thursday or Friday, so that way I'll be sure and I'll be home to hear the verdict, because I'm really excited about that. And anyway, I guess that's about all I got for now. And until next time, bye-bye.